Hey guys, welcome to this new tutorial on the LF1. So I'm going to show a little bit of how to produce a drawing out of this content, hoping that you guys can actually finish the model yourself and then make beautiful drawings with what we have learned, right? The first thing that I want to do is basically be able to store the perspective in which we are working, right? Let's say I really like this perspective, right? So the first thing I'm going to do is just go here in perspective, set view, named views, and I'm going to call this one save my great view, right? So you can see that here it says my great view, right? So we can actually start moving around and decide that we like some other views and name some other views, but we can always just right click here and in set view again, you see that my views are kind of set. My great view, it's here, and we can always go back to the saved position. This is good because let's say that we start exporting some content to some other package, right, like Illustrator. That's what I'm gonna be doing, and we want to come back and just maybe do some changes. It's good that we have saved, like a camera, the perspective that we are kind of exporting, right? So the first way in which we could actually export this stuff is to Illustrator. Let's go ahead and just pick everything, right? And you can go into File. You probably cannot see that, so I'm gonna bring this down here. File, Export Selected, and I'm gonna press Test dot Adobe Illustrator, right? So test 01. And we export it, and everything is fine, right? So we created a file in Illustrator for Illustrator, so we could go into Illustrator here and basically open, going to desktop, test 01, and you see that we have the drawing. The problem with this drawing is that if we zoom in, you can use Alt and the middle, like the scroll bar, to just zoom in and out in Illustrator. Is that this drawing is only the wireframe and it doesn't contain any kind of it doesn't remove the lines that are kind of not required for us. Obviously the line thicknesses is something that we could change. So let's start seeing how to deal a little bit with this drawing, right? So I'm gonna open this tab here and I'm gonna close the stroke, the swatches. The one that I'm interested in is the layers, right? Because the layers contain all the information. You can see that I can just start graying out, hiding everything, and we have all the same layers that we have in Rhino. If we alt click here in a layer, we have selected each one of the individual elements, right? So that's something that you want to do, so you can actually start assigning different stroke weights per layer, right? So 0.01, really thin, for instance. You want something like a hairline, and you can see that the drawing is very detailed, and we can go really thin, right? And still at this point we could remove some of these lines. If let's say you don't want to have that one, maybe you can delete that one, right? And you should go layer by layer, really changing the stroke weight of the layers, right? I'm alt clicking on the layer, so I could just go here and type 0.01. Also you can specify that the stroke weight, I mean the color could be slightly different, right? So if you go for some gray color, just you have to test print it because it might not really print well, but at least you have a visual reference of how these layers are going to work together. So let's do that again. Alt click on the layer, and maybe this one I want to just leave it like a slightly thicker. That seems too much already, so I'm going to put 0.05. and if I want to work with a slightly thicker layer, I could start playing, and you see that I could start building a little bit of hierarchy between some elements, right? Where we could start noticing a little bit of difference, right? And this will use exactly the same layers that you have in Rhino. So if you don't have the layers in Rhino, something that is organized for you, I would recommend you to go back to Rhino and just reorganize the layer. So this is the first technique. Let's see a second technique, right? So this is not so good in the sense that it's just a wireframe, it's not an actual architectural drawing. So let's look at another way of doing this. So I close the Illustrator file and I'm going to go back to Rhino, and I'm going to open the layers here, and let's say I want to just deal with these 3 layers. I'm going to select those, select those 3, select objects, invert, hide. So I just want to deal with only these layers, right? We can check that we're in our view, set view, migrate view, right? So we're in the same view than before. And maybe what I want to do just now is make a 2D drawing out of this. So we would use the command make 2D, and this command will actually make a 2D drawing out of my drawing, right? So you need to make sure that you click here in show hidden lines, and this command will actually use the current view to create a 2D drawing of the geometry that we have selected, and it will use we will create a new layer called make 2D visible lines, where we'll put everything that is visible. The hidden lines will be in this second one, and if there's any annotations here, it's gonna add them here, right? So show hidden layers will actually make this hidden layer for us. Let's see what this produces, and we can actually make sure that you have hidden layers on. This is something really useful. I'm gonna say OK, and basically you can see that there's 2 new layers here, so we can turn off basically these 3 layers of geometry. And let's go to the top view here now, and you can see that we have that view, but now from the top view being completely flat, right? So if we look at it from perspective, it looks deformed because it's a completely flat drawing, right? So this is the way in which you start producing this drawing. You need to make sure that you're exporting this now from the top view, because the view in which you are, it's also really important for the Illustrator file. Now that this is a flat drawing, you have to export it from the top view. So I'm going to select everything and do what we did before. Notice that I have a layer that it's the visible lines and the invisible lines, or the hidden lines, right? So I want to keep those 2. Let's see how to change the colors and change some of the graphics of those. I'm going to select everything, go to File, Export Selected, and I'm going to call this one Test 02, right? So that's good. Now we have Test 02 there, and we can go back to Illustrator and File, Open, and go to Test 02 file, and you can see here that we have just exported only those 2 layers. Sorry if you heard that. And let's see, let's change this layer first to something like 0.1, and then our white layer, that's white, so we could actually change the color of this layer by navigating here and put this in color black, and we will say 0.1 as well. It seems that this color is too thin, so we're gonna say maybe 0.2 or 0.25. That's looking better, and in this case 0.25 as well, and that's looking better, right? So these are the lines that are the visible lines, but these are the hidden lines. So maybe the hidden lines we want to just put them in. I'm alt selecting, and I'm going to change the color of this to a gray, like that. And we can always, so we can see now that our drawing's starting to look quite elegant, in the sense that it's, well, obviously it has lots of little issues that you have to probably clean in Rhino before. You can see that now here it's exporting this line, so maybe these lines you don't want, you have to clean this stuff in Rhino, right? Or change the layer and stuff like that. But it will remove all the lines, and everything that is in this case an interior line is going to be considered in a different layer. So again, maybe this is too thick. I'm going to put 0.1, and I also want to just, in the stroke here, we can actually say show options, and we could say, well, maybe we can just bring this out and say I want these hidden lines to be dashed, right? So I'm gonna say make 2 pixels of dash and then 1 pixel of gap, right? So if we see that now, you can see that our hidden lines have been dashed now. Again, I can alt click on this layer. Maybe I want the gray to be slightly darker, but I want to make 1 pixel and 0.5 or 0.3, and we can see that we are kind of controlling perfectly and very accurately the quality of the drawing, right? And everything is vectorial here, and still we can clean any imperfection. Let's say here I don't like this line here. I can delete that one, and I could even try to move that one there, right? So you see, also maybe the order of the layers is important, so we make sure that our layer, the black layer, is on top of everything else, the main one, and we're missing a line here. This kind of stuff is better to add them in Rhino if you have any problems like that, but obviously if you are already at this stage, you can actually save it here. I'm going to show one more thing in this video. It's like how to do a fill. You can see that we cannot really make a fill of anything, like these are individual lines, and we cannot really assign a fill to something, right? So I'm gonna just close that. I'm not gonna save it, doesn't matter, and I'm gonna go back to Rhino and I'm gonna explain the fill. So what can we fill? For instance, in this case, I would just go into this layer and quickly add some of the lines that I see that are missing, right? So in 2D, or maybe even remove some of this stuff, right? So I could say, well, what about this? So this roof is also missing some stuff. It's important to know that there is some additional work to be done in 2D, right? Like clipping or trimming some lines that might be have some errors. And so that's something to consider. It doesn't come as perfect as we would want to, right? For instance, a few things here, you can always remove that, and you start kind of cleaning a little bit the drawing, right? But let's see, what if I want to just maybe these elements, I want to just perhaps, or the roof, right? Or this element here, we could want to do a fill. So let's make a new layer that we will call fills, and I'm gonna say, well, between this element, this element, this element, that element, and those elements, I'm gonna copy them and I'm going to move to my fields layer and paste them. So I'm going to make a copy of those elements, right? So I can see, well, not really. Let's try again. We have created a copy of each one of them, but we didn't move them to the next layer, right? So let's select them now. So these are the elements. Let's stay in field layer and then change object layer, right? So in this case, maybe this is red layer. Doesn't matter the color right now, it's just to make sure that we actually do have, let's say, what if we want to fill this element here, we can go in trim and select the excess, right? So we can actually join by pressing J, enter. So we join the curves. Now we know that this is a join curve. So you can select the object, and now, for instance, let's do that for a few different ones. So you could say maybe this one, right? So I'm going to copy with Ctrl C, Ctrl V, change to fill layer, and you see that I have this stuff. We could try to join it right away by pressing J, enter, and it works apparently. Yeah. It seems that this is an open curve. 8 curves have been joined into an open curve, so that might be a problem, right? So you want to make sure that it's a closed curve, right? So what I'm going to do here is extend, select the boundary curve, this one, okay, this is becoming tricky here, so we could do something like just cross it a little bit and trim it. Let's explode it first, trim, there we go, and I'm gonna trim also the other direction. This is not the most accurate example, but anyway, it's just showing that we need a closed curve. If not, this won't work. And this one is also a closed curve, so that's excellent. So we have those two elements. We can actually export this again. File, export selected. I'm going to say test3. Right? Perfect. So now we can go back to Illustrator, File, open recent files, now open test3, and we have this red layer, right? We can put the red layer below, and I'm gonna alt select this layer to just make it really thin, and our red layer I'm gonna alt select, and this layer I don't want any stroke color. Basically I don't want it just to draw the line, I just want some fill. So I can double click on the fill and can put some light gray here. You see that that works, and I could just basically I need to specify that my stroke color is empty, right? So I need to specify empty, so no stroke color. You can see also here the empty. So now we have specified in a very clean way as well. You know, you can see the clean and beautiful quality of the vector drawing. Again, I'll select, it will select all these kind of closed curves in these layer fields, and you can actually select a different color, maybe something darker, right? If you're working with some shadows or something that you want to shade. There's a lot of theory about what to shade. If you would like to shade something, like everything that it's looking in this, like from this direction, maybe you want to shade or highlight. So this would be the tools that will allow you. You can also draw some things yourself, like some closed curves, in order to just produce different fills and patterns. So this is the tutorial of how to export. Try to work in this file like this, and then eventually like take everything, like reformat this document into the A2 that we will be working on, and with that you should be able to start printing and seeing some results. Okay, that's it. I'll see you guys soon.